All right, we are back with some more basic GeoGebra. I am at geogebra.org/classic, and in this video, we're going to look at some of these tools that live below the basic tools in the menu. All right, so we looked at the point tool last time. Now let's look at some of these other point tools. So point on object is only going to work if we have some other object in our view. So for instance, let me hide my axes and my grid by right-clicking in the graphics view. Let's say I have a line. I can use this point on object tool. See how my cursor changes from an arrow to a hand? So I can click on that line, and now if I try to select that point, I can't drag that point off of that line. C is just some point on line F. I can do the same thing if I have a polygon. I can put a point on that polygon and it can't leave that polygon. This can be useful if you're trying to approximate a construction and you know a point has to live on a particular line, but you don't know the exact intersection, and you want to be able to adjust your size. It can be a useful tool. We're not going to worry about attach or detach point, but basically I can detach point C from the line, or I can attach C to the line. It's pretty straightforward. Not so useful in constructing geometric designs. The intersect tool is going to be our most important point tool that we're going to use. So let's say I have two lines and I want to find this intersection. I don't just want to use my point tool because generally speaking, that's not going to be determined by that intersection. Although in this case, it did snap to that intersection, but I would say in general, you can't trust that. What you want to do is use the intersect tool, which every time is going to find exactly that point where those two lines intersect. So I can either click on that intersection if it's clear, or let me hit delete. I can select this line and then this line, and that's going to define point J. And you can see in your algebra view that point J is defined as the intersection of lines G and F. So that works if you have two lines intersecting. If I have a circle intersecting with a line, it's going to intersect at 2 points. So if I have an object that intersects another object at 2 points, if I click on one of the intersections, it's just going to give me one of those points. Let me delete this. Delete. Put this line back in there. Just kidding. All right, hang on. Let me put a line in here and draw a circle again. Okay, there we go. So if I click on one of the intersections with the intersect tool, I am only going to get one intersection. But if I click on the circle and then the line, then I'm going to get both points of intersection. So it just kind of depends on what you want. Sometimes it's useful to find all the points of intersection. Sometimes you only need one. So that's the intersect tool. The midpoint or center tool is really nice. It allows you to find the midpoint between 2 points. So say I want the point halfway between B and C. I click on C, then B, and that gives me the midpoint N. If I have a circle, I'm going to use this circle through 3 points tool. If I have a circle that I don't know the center of, I can use that midpoint or center tool, click on the circle, and it gives me the center of that circle. So if, say, I used my compass tool or some other means to construct a circle other than the default circle with center through point, and I didn't know the circle center. That can be a useful tool. We don't need to worry about complex number, extremum, or roots for geometric design. Those are more if you're doing algebraic or more complicated math things than drawing geometric patterns. If you're curious about those tools, shoot me a comment on Patreon, and maybe we can go into those a little bit further. All right, the line tools are pretty straightforward. Line, obviously, we already went over. Segment, it's pretty straightforward. You click on one point and then the other, and it gives you the line segment. I'm going to skip over segment with a given length for a second. Ray, again, pretty straightforward. It's going to extend forever in the direction of the second point that you select. Let's talk about segment with a given length. So let's say I want a line segment that comes out of point P that's the length of line segment AC. So I can click on point P and say I want it to have length AC, and there you go. Point S isn't fixed, but the length of PS is fixed to match the length of AC. That can be useful if you're trying to transfer a distance. You can also create a segment with a specific length, so a length of 1 unit, which everything we're doing is independent of length, so that's not going to be as useful. But if you were doing a construction that's grid based and you needed something that was the square root of 2 or something like that, that could be useful to have that length. Polyline is cool. It gives you basically the outside edge of a polygon. So let me go to an empty space down here and put a few points. So polyline is going to give you an open polygon. So if I click UVW and then back to U, it's only going to give me the compound line UVW. It's never going to close that polygon. So that's what your polygon tool does. The polyline is always going to be open like this, but you have to select your first point last. So this is useful if you have some open shape that you want to define, but you don't want it filled in. We'll use it at some point in a future video with some geometric design. We don't need to worry about vector or vector from point. Again, these are more if you're in high school math class or doing some math on an advanced level, not so much needed for geometric design. A lot of these are going to be useful. We talked about the perpendicular line tool last time. Parallel line is going to work pretty similar. So if I want a line parallel to VW through point U, I can click on U first and then, oh, I guess I have to do a line. Line segment doesn't work. I didn't realize that. I thought a line segment would work. I learn things every day. So I can click on the point, then the line, or I can click on the line and then a point. So just like the perpendicular line tool, the order doesn't matter. And you'll notice when I click these, a little help menu pops up that tells you how to use that tool. If ever you're unfamiliar with the tool and you just want to know how it works, that is a useful option. Perpendicular bisector, we're going to use this one a lot. So this creates a line that's goes through the midpoint between 2 points and is perpendicular to the line segment connecting those 2 points, whether or not you actually have a line segment drawn. So I could put one in between V and W, and it's perpendicular to line segment VW and passes through the midpoint between V and W. Or I could put one between V and O, even though I don't have a line segment between V and O, but it still gives me that mirror line between those 2 points. So this one is a super useful tool. Angle bisector, also going to be very, very useful. If I want the bisector of this angle, so that is I want to divide this angle in half, I just want to click these 3 points with the vertex in the middle. It doesn't matter whether I go UVW or WVU, but V has to be in the middle if I want to bisect that angle. And I often like to change the line style. So I've selected that line with my arrow tool, and I go here and I can change that line style. I often like to change the line style of angle bisectors to make them stand out because I use them pretty often, but I like to distinguish them from other construction lines because I often tend to hide them. Color also can be useful. So let's say I want to make it magenta. So notice that also changes the way it shows up in the algebra menu, which can make it useful for hiding and showing later on. Tangents, we're not going to use this too much, but it can be useful for certain constructions. So say, for instance, I want the tangent lines to this circle through point W. I select W and the circle. Helps if I'm on the right tool. I select W and then the circle, and it gives me the 2 tangent lines to that circle. Or I could select the circle first and then the point. So for certain constructions that's useful. I don't use it a whole lot. We don't need to worry about these last 3 for geometric design. Again, if you're curious about these tools, leave me a comment on Patreon and we can look at them further. Polygon tools. Let me move to some open space over here. So we used the regular, I shouldn't use the word regular, we used the basic polygon tool last time. Next, let's use the regular polygon tool. So if I have 2 points, what the regular polygon tool will do is if I click one point and then the other, the regular polygon tool is going to construct a polygon with equal side lengths and equal angles with the number of sides and vertices that you tell it in this dialog box. So let's just leave it at the default 4, with those 2 points as 2 of its vertices. And the order I click them matters. So it's always going to construct in a counterclockwise method. So if I click Z, then A1, the square is going to go up. If I click A1 then Z, my polygon is going to go down. So let's say this time I want 7. I have a 7-sided polygon on side AZ. I use this regular polygon tool all the time because it's kind of the easiest way to get equal divisions of a circle in GeoGebra, I've found, because it's super easy and already gives you the vertices that you need. Again, there's tools here that we're not going to use too much, rigid polygon and vector polygon. We don't need to worry about those for geometric design. Circle tools, these can be super useful. Circle, center, and radius. This one's a lot like that line segment with a given length. So I can click a point and then tell it I want radius AB or radius 1. And it's going to give me a circle with that radius. So just depending on what we want, and because these points were just sort of random with my point tool, that's the label, I can move those circles around. But if I say put one on H, let's say I want radius 2, when I move point H, it's going to adjust anything else that was dependent on point H. So that's that line, the lines that were parallel to that line, etc. The compass tool is really cool. So that allows you to copy a circle to any other center. So if I select this circle and then click this point over here, I get a copy of that circle anywhere I want. This one, I love this tool. Circle through 3 points is great if you are doing some more advanced circle tangency types of problems. But for most Islamic patterns, I haven't found a need to use the circle through 3 points tool. But like, if I have any 3 points, I can construct a circle through those 3 points. In some of my Gothic tracery videos, you'll see me use that. But not so much the Islamic patterns, but it can be useful. Semicircle is always going to create a half circle. So I select 2 points that would be the diameter. So C1, B1 creates that semicircle, A1, Z creates that semicircle. Again, it's going in a counterclockwise motion, just like that regular polygon tool. Circular arc can be useful, but you have to be careful and make sure the 2 points are on the same circle. So let's say I want the circle centered at F1 that passes through H1 and D1, but I just want that arc. I don't want the whole circle. I can use that. Circumcircular arc. This one works a lot like that circle through 3 points, except it's only going to give you an arc. This one's kind of nice if you're doing biomorphic patterns and you just are trying to like approximate curvature. Of course, it can be used for exact constructions as well, but I found that I use it most often when I'm doing biomorphic stuff. Sectors, we're not going to use this too much. Basically, it gives you a filled in arc. And then you could do the same thing with 3 points if you don't know the center. I don't use those too often in geometric design. Hyperbola and parabola tools. Go to some empty space down here. Again, these I'm not going to use so much in Islamic design, but I do use them a lot in Gothic tracery. So hyperbola, you select your foci and then you select a point on the hyperbola. This can be useful for finding tangent circles. And parabola, you select a point and a line and it constructs the parabola with that focus and directrix. And then if you have 5 points, you can construct any conic at all. So let's select 5 random points and see what conic section it gives us. So I'm going to select V, W, U, I, N, O, oh, and it made a hyperbola. So I don't use that one very much in geometric design, but I guess if you're doing some more advanced geometric problems, it could be useful. Angle with a given size, this one can be useful if you're trying to copy an angle. So let's say first I have, let me go to some open space down here. Let's say I have 3 points and I already have, this angle. So this is angle alpha. Let's say I want to copy that angle. I can go my angle with a given size and I can enter a number, which is nice, or I could enter the symbol for, or the letter or whatever I have, the name of that other angle, and I can tell it whether I want it clockwise or counterclockwise, and it will copy that angle on that line segment at the point that I select. So that's kind of a neat tool, especially if you're doing some more advanced construction. And then we're not really going to use most of these other ones, the distance or length, area, slope. These are more if you're doing algebraic type things. We will use the reflect about point tool. So I can reflect a polygon about a point, or I could reflect a point about a point, or I could reflect a line about a point. Again, any kind of object, mirror image with respect to that point is a flip and a rotation by 180 degrees. So that's what's happening with that. Reflect about circle. Again, I'm not going to use this a lot in Islamic geometry, but if I have an object and I want to reflect it about a circle, I can do that. That one's kind of cool. So that gives me what's called a circle inversion. I use this more if I'm doing some Gothic tracery tangent circle problems. And you can rotate about a point if you need to rotate by a certain amount. So let's say I want to rotate this point about this point by 45 degrees. You can't really see where I did that. So let's go to some empty space and put 2 points. So if I want to reflect this point, or excuse me, rotate this point about this point by 45 degrees, this angle we can see is 45 degrees. I tend to use the text command to do that more than I actually ever use the tool. We don't need to worry about translate by vector or dilate from point. We're not going to use those a whole lot in geometric design. We looked at the slider. We haven't really used it too much yet. I'll do that in a future video. Text, basically you can put text like, this is my pattern, which, you know, if you're trying to annotate things, could be useful. Image, you can put, this image is kind of large. If you're trying to analyze a pattern, you can import an image and construct on top of that image if you want. I know a lot of people like to do that. I don't really like to do that because it's hard to do it exactly and get it right. But that is an option. And then if you're trying to make interactive GeoGebra applets and you want buttons, checkboxes, or input boxes, those can be useful. And then you've got zoom in, zoom out, show hide object. These are all pretty straightforward. I never use these zoom in and out buttons. I just use my scroll wheel, but I guess if you didn't have a scroll wheel or a way to zoom in or out other than in the menu, you could use those. And show hide object, I tend to just select the object in the algebra view rather than using the tool. Same thing for show hide label. I tend to right click things and then check the show hide label. You can copy the style of a line. So let's say I want to make this line also pink and dashed, I could. And then if you want to delete things. So that's a very quick rundown of all those tools, and we'll look at how to use them further in future videos where we'll actually construct something. So thanks for sticking around. See you next time.